Hello, Mary. How are you today? I'm Frank O'Donnell from Teledyne Hanau, and I'm visiting with Dr. Dale Smith at the University of Washington Dental School. With his cooperation, we are going to demonstrate the application and the benefits of the Hana Spring Bow and the Modular Articulator.
The purpose of an articulator is to simulate jaw movements. The mandible can perform two types of movements. The first is a hinge movement. The second is a gliding or a translation. The hinge movement is the important one that we want to transfer to the articulator. If we can duplicate that, we can go a long way toward duplicating jaw movement. And this hinge movement has an axis of rotation that is within the condyle. If we can transfer the point where this axis of rotation of in the condyle is constant to the maxilla, we have taken a big step toward duplicating jaw movement. With this in mind, no two people are alike. They differ in length of face, width of face, and facial symmetry. For example, the relationship of the axis to the maxillary teeth in this young lady with a long face will be considerably different than in this young man with a shorter, rounded face. This face exhibits considerable asymmetry, and the relationship of the axis to the maxillary teeth will differ between the right and left sides. Please take note of the differences between these faces. If these differences in dimension are not transferred to the articulator, errors in the tooth contact and centric relation and lateral excursions can be the result. Previous research by Brotman has indicated that an error in the axis transfer of 5 millimeters can cause an error of 0.15 millimeters in centric occlusion when using an interocclusal centric relation record, which is 3 millimeters in thickness. Thorpe et al. Have shown that the use of an average value articulator with no axis transfer can result in errors of almost 1 millimeter in the antero-posterior relationship of the teeth. Another way that people differ is in the inclination of the occlusal plane. It is a very important matter to transfer this to the articulator so that the visualization of the inclination of the anterior teeth is transferred to the articulator. Before the dentist and technician can accurately plan and carry out restorative procedures on the teeth, the arc of closure, the plane of occlusion, and a centric relation for the specific patient must be transferred to the articulator. The records required to accomplish this are a face bow transfer and a centric relation record. To simulate the gliding or transitory movements requires an additional record to set the inclination of the condylar paths. If this information is not available to the technician, the net result is often an increase in occlusal adjustment, which may destroy the original occlusal anatomy. There may also be a problem with attaining the proper inclination of the anterior teeth or crowns. This all adds up to an increase in chair time for the dentist. The Hana Spring Bow is a self-centering ear bow. It allows the dentist to rapidly and easily obtain a face bow record and transfer it to the articulator. It can also be steam sterilized in an autoclave. It consists of the spring bow itself, which is an ear bow which springs in and outward to allow placement into the ears. The ear bow also has an axis orbital indicator on it, which allows the vertical orientation of the face bow. This is the transfer clamp assembly, which attaches the bite fork or the bite plane to the face bow itself. This assembly here is the anterior elevator, which allows direct transfer to the articulator from the face bow, and this mounting platform with the built-in cast support, which allows mounting on the articulator without using the face bow itself. To illustrate the use of the component parts of the face bow, we're going to introduce you to Harvey, who is a mannequin set up to train individuals in the use of the face bow. Harvey has a maxilla here that consists of a clamp to which the face bow fork can be placed. The fork is always oriented with this brass rivet on the top here on the upward position. Place that into Harvey. This simulates the use of compound or wax as a registration medium to relate it to the maxillary teeth. And we're next ready to apply the face bow. We have previously assembled the transfer rod to the face bow in the anterior here. You will note that there is a vertical and a horizontal rod and 3 knobs. 1, number 2, and number 3. We place the right-hand clamp over the horizontal rod on the face bow fork, the bite fork, and slide it easily into position here, and spread the face bow so that we can insert the ear rods into the ear holes, the external auditory meatus, and raise and lower the face bow until the axis orbital indicator is at the proper vertical location. We can then tighten this vertical rod clamp, number 1, to secure that relationship. We no longer need that indicator anymore because that dimension is set. We can now center the face bow by moving it from side to side. This centers the face bow laterally as well as anteroposteriorly. Once it seeks its level where it's not binding, we can then tighten nut number 2 and number 3. Now, all we have to do is have Harvey open his mouth here and release the bite fork, and we spread the ear rods and remove it from the mouth. Today, Mrs. Johnson, we're going to use this caliper device, which fits into your ears, to transfer the relationship of your upper jaw to a laboratory instrument. To prepare the bite fork for the face bow transfer, we're going to use a sheet of baseplate wax as the recording medium. Compound can also be used for this purpose, but baseplate wax is a little more simple to use. So we have one piece of baseplate wax that we're heating in the compound heater here at 140 degrees, and we're going to fold this wax once, twice, and 3 times, and form a roll, then stretch it out slightly and attach it to the face bow fork, folding it over both sides of the fork so that there's an even layer of wax on each side of the fork. First step in securing a face bow transfer is to take a bite fork record. The bite fork has a brass rivet on the upper side, so it is very important that this be kept upward. We've already softened our wax, and we are ready to insert it in the mouth to secure the record. Go to the rear and orient it over the maxillary teeth. Have the brass rivet centered between the central incisors. Then have the patient close lightly, just a little bit more. Hold it right there. It is not necessary to secure a centric relation record, centric relation record at this time. We let this cool for a moment, remove it, and inspect our record. Here we have good indentations of the maxillary teeth, and the mandibular teeth have not penetrated through the wax, so that the record could be distorted if it had been penetrated. It's very important that the cast or the occlusion rim be tested into the record after it's chilled to ensure that it is very stable. An unstable record will not have proper accuracy. Securing the face bow record is actually a very simple procedure. We first place the bite fork into the mouth. Be sure that it's in the proper indentations. And we've previously loosened all of the clamps. We slide the number 3 clamp onto the bite fork and spread the ear rods. Have the patient help us insert them into the ears, like so. And then we elevate and lower the face bow until we can orient the infraorbital pointer to the axis orbital plane, which is a plane running through the 2 hinge axes and the infraorbital rim. We then need to tighten this number 1 screw at the proper level. Tighten it securely so that it won't slip. We're now finished with the infraorbital pointer, and we can move it back out of the way. We next want to be sure that the face bow is not in a bind and it's perfectly free. Can be pushed too far to one side so that we will not secure a correct record. We now tighten number 2 and then tighten number 3. Tighten them securely so that it won't slip. We're now ready to remove the face bow from the patient. We open, please, and slide it out of the mouth. And that completes our face bow record. We can now remove the record from the face bow, and this is what we use to transfer the cast to the articulator. Hanau Modular Articulator has a number of features which allow the clinician to select the type of articulator he desires. First, it is an archon articulator, which means that the condylar elements are on the mandibular arch and the fossae elements are on the maxillary. This more closely duplicates the actual relationship on the patient. Secondly, the members of this articulator will separate. And to separate these, there are these screws, these little cams in the back, and we can unlock the articulator and the members will come apart, which is a nice feature for restorative dentistry. Fixed restorative, like this feature very much. The articulator also has very definite centric relation locks, which allow the articulator to be locked so that it can only perform an opening and closing hinge movement. Another interesting feature is that no plastering stand is required in order to mount the mandibular cast. The articulator is very stable when it's turned over like this. The modular articulator has adjustable condylar elements. The condylar inclination can be set by loosening this set screw on the top, this knob on the top, and raising and lowering the inclination to accept the record. It also has an adjustable Bennett angle, which is adjusted by loosening the other large set screw and moving the inner curbing of the condylar element inward and outward according to the record that's placed into the articulator. There are 4 types of fossa elements available for the Hanau Modular Articulator. The one that we have illustrated before is the one with the adjustable Bennett angle. And the second type that is available is the program fossa, in which a certain degree of Bennett immediate side shift has been programmed into the fossa element. There are various choices of curvatures and immediate side shifts available with this element. The third type is the adjustable Bennett shift with the anterior adjustment or the protrusive adjustment. With an Allen wrench, this screw here can be adjusted to allow a given degree of protrusive orientation to the mandibular movement. And the fourth type is the radial shift, which incorporates a curved path of movement with an adjustable immediate side shift as well as an adjustable Bennett angle. The incisal guide table is adjustable both anteroposteriorly and for the lateral rise. It also is removable, and a custom incisal guide table can be substituted. It has a marking on the center of the incisal guide table that allows the incisal guide table to be set, to be varied, without changing the vertical dimension. There are separate screws to lock the incisal guide table in place and a separate one to lock the inclination. The incisal guide pin can be reversed. This is a chisel type that is intended to be used with the adjustable incisal guide table. This end is the pointed end that is designed to be used for developing a custom incisal guidance with resin. That can be either used with a special type of flat incisal guide table, or it can be placed into this adjustable incisal guide table. Other important features of the Hanau Modular Articulator are that the parts are interchangeable. We've already shown you this with the interchangeability of the Condylar elements. This requires very precision machining. Another very important feature is that casts can be transferred from one articulator to the other. This minimizes the need for extra articulators and improves communication between the dentist and the laboratory technician. The face bow record can be transferred to the articulator by one of 2 methods. One is by the direct transfer, where the face bow itself is used. The second is with the mounting platform, where an indirect mounting is used. To use the direct mounting, we need to remove the ear rod and attach an anterior elevating device onto the anterior vertical rod, and then spring the face bow apart and place it onto the condylar axis of the articulator. It snaps into the second hole on the side arm of the face bow. We then can use this anterior elevating rod to set the proper vertical level of the face bow record, and that is either to the axis orbital indicator if one is on the articulator here, or to the lower level of the maxillary mounting ring. We then would be ready to use plaster to attach the maxillary cast after we place cast support in the lower members so that the face bow does not sag. The second method of mounting would involve using the mounting platform onto the lower member of the articulator. It attaches where the mounting ring would normally go, and this is the indirect mounting method. And we can detach this mounting clamp assembly from the face bow itself, and that is attached. We have to remove this elevating rod to attach it to this anterior receptacle in the mounting platform. The cast support then can be brought into contact. Cast support is an integral part of this assembly, and then we can plaster the maxillary cast onto the articulator with this indirect method, which is the method that I normally prefer to use. It's simpler and allows your face bow to use for another patient. Before dismissing our patient, we secured a centric relation record, a left lateral positional record, and a right lateral positional record, in addition to our face bow record. These can be transferred to the laboratory, or if the dentist is mounting his own casts, they are now prepared for mounting. We're going to mount the cast in the Hanau Model 190 Modular Articulator with, in this case, adjustable Bennett Fossey. Before mounting into the articulator, it's important that the articulator be locked in centric relation, and using this centric lock, it is secured so that it can only perform a hinge movement. We've also used these knobs to zero out the Bennett angle on both sides, and the articulator is securely locked in centric relation. To mount the casts, we're going to use the mounting platform, which has a built-in cast support. With this particular mounting platform, it's not necessary to remove the incisal guide table for mounting the face bow record. The mounting platform is placed into position just as a mounting ring would be placed into position on the mandibular frame. Tightened securely. And the face bow record is then placed into the anterior receptacle and tightened. The cast support can then be elevated into contact and tightened so that there's no chance of distorting the record when the cast is mounted. We then place the cast into the articulator, and we're now ready to attach it with plaster. At this point, we have mounted the maxillary cast. To prepare the articulator to mount the mandibular cast, we need to continue to have the articulator locked in centric relation. We set the incisal guide table so that the mark on the incisal guide table is even with the incisal guide pin, and we need to set the level of the incisal guide pin. If we are mounting at the correct vertical dimension, the same vertical dimension as the record, we need to set the articulator even with the large ring on the incisal guide pin. In this instance, we are going to mount with an interocclusal record on natural dentition, so we need to drop this incisal guide pin several millimeters. I would estimate that at about 4 millimeters. And we set the incisal guide pin there. Now we invert the articulator, and we can place the centric relation record on the maxillary cast and relate the mandibular cast to that record. Now we are ready to attach the mandibular cast with plaster to the articulator. We've now mounted the maxillary and mandibular casts. To mount the mandibular cast, we've used this centric relation record, and see it closes very nicely into this centric relation record. Now, to set the articulator according to the Condylar registrations and the Bennett angle, we use the lateral check bites, And here we have the right lateral check bite. Place it into position. We have to unlock the centric locks. And I'll just set them part way up so that we can see the inclination here. And we move the articulator until it will accept the record. I've moved the Bennett angle to the greatest Bennett angle at this point. And we've unlocked the Condylar elements. Lock the Condylar elements. We press down firmly and we move the condylar inclination so that it's too low and the anterior has come up. We move it down until it's too high. And the posterior comes up off of the record, and we even out the record, and our condylar inclination is approximately 27 degrees. We can lock that in position. And now, to set the Bennett angle, we move the Bennett guide until it contacts the condylar ball, and we've recorded a Bennett angle of between 10 and 15 degrees, about 12 degrees, and we lock that into position. To set the opposite side, we use the left lateral record and use the same procedure. We hope this videotape is an aid in understanding the advantages of using a face bow and a semi-adjustable articulator. The Hana Spring Bow and Modular Articulator provide simple, easy-to-apply instrumentation for simulating jaw movement. Their wider application will result in prosthodontic restorations, which are better adapted to the individual patient's mandibular movements and fewer chairside adjustments.